Hello and welcome to What It Takes. I'm Tom Landon. As a hearing person and a huge music fan, I've always taken the power of sound for granted. Turn it on, crank it up, and be transported to another world. Whether you're a fan of classical, country, rock and roll, or death metal, you've probably experienced it yourself. My guest today is Tyler Godsey, and if you've ever been to an event at the 5 Points Music Sanctuary in Roanoke, you've probably heard Tyler talk about how much the experience of live music has meant to him and his family. But the work of 5 Points extends well beyond putting on live shows. From music therapy to hearing loss advocacy to providing ways for even the profoundly deaf to experience live music. The team at 5 Points is truly engaged in unleashing the power of sound for everyone. I'm super glad to get a chance to talk to you, Tyler. Now, we go back a little ways, although we don't know each other super well, and I'm looking forward to getting into your head a little bit. When I've been to shows at 5 Points, you always MC the event, start off by kind of giving your pitch about the power of sound. And I thought it'd be good for everybody just to kind of get your enthusiasm by you practicing that on me a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's, our story is the power of sound. It's really about this idea of what happens after a spark, right? My children were both born deaf. At the age of 11 months, I was lucky enough to give them both cochlear implants, allowing us to celebrate the gift of sound. It's that gift that serves as the inspiration for everything we do at 5 Points Music. There we celebrate sound, we embrace it, and we pursue it. In doing so, we remind ourselves that the power of sound is more than what we hear. It's about what we see, it's about what we feel. It's also about what we share collectively now. Now when we mix that together into a pot, right, those moments that we chase at a show, those moments when the lights and the band and the audience all hit, it's those moments that we're all on the same page, right? For a fleeting second, it doesn't matter where we come from, what side of the political spectrum we're on, who we love, what God we love, it all washes away. When I first experienced that as a young kid, I thought if everybody could feel what I feel right now, the world would be a whole lot better place. And to think about that idea, right, that serves as the apex of one point when we talk about the power of sound. But on that spectrum, it's on the other side, it's a more innate concept. When I turned to my son's ears, he was still a baby, and my wife leaned over, and the first word she says were, "I love you." And these are three simple words that we say to each other all the time. Thousands of times in my life, I've heard them and felt them. But at that moment, they hit me in a unique way, with an emotional, mental, physical, spiritual impact. At its essence, Tom, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about the power of sound. It's recognizing the idea that in life, it's often the little things that have the most profound impacts on us. The simple words we say and how we say them, like please, thank you, I'm sorry, or I love you. They have the power to change and alter the course of where we go, what we do, how we feel. For me, that moment, those three words, those three vibrations, I love you, they serve as that spark for everything we do at 5 Points. And between those two ends of the spectrum, it serves as the playing field for what we do as an organization. We use our shows to bring people together, to unite around that concept of purity and unity at that moment with lights, bands, audience. But they also serve to fund programs, like you said, music therapy, hearing loss advocacy, accessibility initiatives, and more. And as a result of that, over the 5 years, we've had an incredible story that we've been able to tell. And we're just beginning to write more and more chapters. With each year and with each show that passes, it gives us more and more to learn from, more and more to reflect on. And here we stand 5 years later, really just eager to chase that moment into the future.
Sure, and thank you for that. And I remember the first time I walked into 5 Points, I was just blown away by the space. So before we talk a whole lot about the programs or anything else, many of our viewers live outside the Roanoke area. Just tell me about that building, that place that is 5 Points.
So 5 Points was an old church built in 1929, St. Paul's Evangelical Church. It operated as a church throughout the decades, and I think in the early 80s it were decommissioned as its last full-time church. And over the period since then, there have been various businesses. There have been an interior decorating firm, insurance companies, yoga studios, photography studios, construction offices. And so it's got a story that we've talked about. If you think about that, just since 1929, you've had a space where there's been a dedicated intent of energy that's been put into it. The spirit of going and to your Sunday service in which you pray for healing, for forgiveness. You pray for answers and for help. You celebrate love and weddings. You celebrate mournings and loss. All of those spiritual manifestations over the life of that space has really given this sort of, it's a buzz when you walk in there. You can't quite explain it, right? And there's a lot of venues that give you its own unique buzz, its own unique vibe. But I would be mistaken if I said that what 5 Points has is anything different. I mean, it is a truly unique place for people to come, whether they are coming to heal, to celebrate, to mourn, to unite, to gather. All of those emotions that we bring together in life, we have a space there where we mix it all together in that pot and chase those moments.
So before you became essentially a music entrepreneur and a running a foundation, clearly music is one of the most important forces of your life, and you talked a little bit about it when I asked you the first question, but just describe for me your musical journey. What kind of music were you into as a kid, and how did that lead you where you are now?
I was a huge, maybe one of the top Columbia House and BMG music collectors.
Yeah, right.
I think I got 6 or 7 copies of Skeletons in the Closet, the old Grateful Dead albums. And after I got the 6th or 7th copy, I realized my pennies didn't go very far anymore.
Right, but for those who don't know, the Columbia and those record companies, when we were kids, you sent away a penny taped to a card, and they sent you 8 albums, and then you were on the hook for several more after that. Right?
They're still trying to find me. But I started to explore live music. I remember that there was on August 9th, 1998, I was in Virginia Beach for a Phish concert, my first Phish concert. And Phish is really my apex stuff. I chase music. It doesn't matter really what concert it is. If I'm around good people and there's good energy, I'll get down with it. But I remember being at that concert, and it was the anniversary of Jerry Garcia's passing. And the whole show, they were talking about how there was going to be this big memorial or something they were going to do special for Jerry's, anniversary. And it was late in the second set, and they did this little, tease into Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and then there was this shooting star in the background, and then all of a sudden, everyone was like, that was the moment, right? And it was really special. The show itself was my first Phish show, and it just jaw dropped, that moment where I was like, if everybody could feel what I'm feeling right now, the world would be a better place. But the real moment of that show wasn't the shooting star, as magical as it was at the end when they came out for an encore, and they started the first notes of Terrapin Station. And I've seen hundreds upon hundreds of Phish shows since then. Never before have I felt the surge of energy and the roar of a crowd, even close to what that was. Now, I'm sure that you misremember, the intensity of it, right? Because you build it up in your head, but it is really unified in thought that there have not been a moment like that in Phish's sort of history, with the crowd and everybody around each other, strangers that didn't know anyone, hugging, tears, and it was kind of funny if you think about it, right? Because of the emotional outburst of energy of a couple notes of music, but it was this feeling that it's a drug, right? And it's unlike anything else. It really is. You can explore a bunch of different things, but that feeling of unity, of purity, with the sound wave just sort of emanating on everybody, it was really just a magical moment. And that set me off, so I chased Phish. I went on Phish tour, I went String Cheese tours, I did a lot of jam stuff, but at the end of the day, I don't think that I've confined myself to one genre or another. One of the reasons I love Phish so much, Tom, is when I was driving around the country when I was about 19, I'd put in a long Phish album, and you got a 10 to 15 minute jam. A lot of your pop songs give you 3 minutes and 50 seconds, right? And it's over, the next song. One of the things I loved about Phish is that they teach you the art of patience. A lot of the early parts of a Phish song can be uncomfortable, right? The lyrics might not match up with what you're aesthetically used to in your ears, and it can be awkward at first. But some of the most amazing parts of a Phish song don't happen until after the 5-minute mark and somewhere towards the 10-minute mark. And it's a completely different song during that part. What it reminded me of as I was starting to explore their music was that patience would allow you the opportunity to find something that you might not have found otherwise. If I'd got uncomfortable at the beginning of a Reba and felt like the lyrics in it was clunky or whatever, and I just skipped to the next song, I never would have known what happens after 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And now 5 minutes and 30 seconds to the 15-minute mark, it's a completely different song. That value of patience, it translates to everything else in life. Taking time to trust that where you're going will lead you to a place of opportunity you didn't know was already there. It'll open your ears and your mind to something you might not have thought about. And ultimately, you'll find a different world that you didn't know was, available to you.
That's one of the better explanations. I'm not a huge Fish fan, but I'd say one of the better explanations of that music that I've ever heard. You're the father of 2 deaf children, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've described that moment when those cochlear implants were turned on, but I know one of the things about 5 Points is it's not a huge venue, and yet you've put a lot of money and resources and personnel into kind of the light show and the experience in that room.
Right.
How, I think I know where you'll go with this, but how does that sort of, the other senses play into the enjoyment of the musical experience?
It's a delicate thing, quite honestly. Your initial reaction when you think about, oh, okay, I can't hear, so they got to see, what can they feel, or what can they see visually? Were moments of exploration for me. I think about the lights, and I think about what we see as being something magical. And quite honestly, for some people that have low light vision issues, they might actually find crazy light to be distracting. They might actually cause them to have headaches, right? One of the points of our programs, and one of the things we try to embrace philosophically, is to think about someone else for a moment, empathy. In my head, yes, I want a banging light show with craziness and it's just all over the place. But the more I talk to some people that have low light vision, issues, they don't necessarily like that. But it gets us thinking, Tom, about how do they like to explore those experiences? What makes it valuable to them? When I think about my kids and I want to take them to a concert, I want to know what it is that makes them enjoy that experience more, because I want them to feel and experience the same things I felt and I experienced as a young kid. And I struggle because what I think in my head does not always translate to them. I did the sub-packs as an initial point of introduction.
Yeah, and explain what the sub-pack is.
Backpacks, and it's haptics, right? It's just like your phone rings and it vibrates. Well, imagine that put into a big backpack that we feed into the PA system wirelessly, right? It's not novel, it's not new. These are done all over the place. But for what we did, it was just a simple, easy, approachable, low-cost, effective concept of accessibility that we might not be able to afford a sign language interpreter to come in and perform every time. It might be other points of issues when exploring other ADA accommodations. But what I wanted to do was to use the sub-packs as a starting point to develop conversations about what does that experience mean to somebody that has hearing loss. I remember when I brought my kids in and I had them put on the sub-packs for the first time, I thought they're gonna love it. And they did. They loved it for about 20 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. And they're like, okay, it's kind of done.
So it sort of vibrates the whole body, the chest, lets you feel the music.
Yeah, it takes the low frequency vibrations of the music and it just sends it in the person wearing it. But they have these in everything from chairs to little carpets. It's really something that's just a deployable technology that's being used in a lot of different ways. Haptics is part of creating a more universally approachable world. We do other programs, like we have colorblind correction glasses for people to watch lights that's originally intended. Now, in trying these things, right, we've been able to do some quality control on them, test them, do they really work? People on various spectrums of colorblindness, so you have different colorblind spectrum glasses. So we've slowly tried to add to our fleet. Some of them work better than others. But these are ideas in which we want to use our space to explore non-traditional points of accessibility so that we can make those experiences more universally enjoyable for all. Again, it's not just about what we hear, it's about what we see, it's about what we feel. It's also, more importantly though, for me, about what we share with the people around us. It's those moments of empathy where we kind of come together and where all that combined in that pot is where the magic happens.
Right, and I know that, in the traditional, you guys have been very careful as a fairly, again, small organization about making sure that those traditional ADA, it is a very accessible building that it didn't used to be, is that right?
It needs to be better. It needs to be better, and I wake up every day. We talk about learning. We talk about what do we do when we wake up tomorrow and figure out how to make another step. And I've created, with the help of a lot of people, I've created this world in which we have a blank canvas in which we can go out and learn and challenge ourselves to grow and to develop every day. It's not right, it's not always perfect, but there's always something more we can do. It is accessible. We have an ADA ramp, we have ADA bathrooms, but when it comes to our music therapy program in the lower level, we struggle to get ADA access to the lower level.
Right.
These are things that I think about them, like, God, if I espouse these as philosophical tenets for what we stand for as an organization, we need to make them high priorities for what we do as we go forward. Part of that has been built into our goal of purchasing the building this year, in which we've announced a capital fundraising campaign to raise $550,000 to purchase the sanctuary. With this money, not only will we be able to go and create a permanent home for us, we'll be able to leverage that funding to invest in our lower level access, to put a wheelchair lift that will go downstairs to provide access to the music therapy studios for people with wheelchairs. We'll invest in upgrading our music therapy studios themselves to make them soundproof, create adaptable spaces to fill for group spaces or individual spaces. Music, it'd be a recording studio concept for them. The goal for us is to remind ourselves that even though we're good, and even though things look good, always something more we can do.
Right, right. And so music therapy, you've talked around it a little bit, but what are, I know what you want to do later, but you're doing some things now. How are you working with other nonprofits or practitioners to provide music therapy, and what does that look like for the children and adults who participate in it?
So the music therapy program was the very first program we really launched, and it's really been wildly successful. Initially, it started with providing free group music therapy to a group of children with Down syndrome, 3 to 5 years old. The idea is to introduce the group to what music therapy could be, but the real value of music therapy doesn't really, it's experienced more on an individual level. So the goal was to find a group of people, hopefully you'd find 1 or 2 people within that group that would really benefit or want to take it to another level. And then we provide funding for those individuals to have individual sessions. As we've grown over the 4 or 5 years here, we started with these quarterly sessions, and we've moved from the 3 to 5-year-old with Down syndrome to veterans with PTSD and everywhere in between. As we've grown, the music therapy partners, Anderson Music Therapy, has grown as well. They now have music therapists throughout Southwest Virginia, and including markets like Radford, the New River Valley, Smith Mountain Lake, Martinsville. What we've been able to do as we've built up more and more funding is to take that funding and provide scholarship for people to have individual sessions throughout the region. Since we've started, I think we've provided somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 worth of free music therapy over these last 5 years. That therapy program is, people wonder, well, would it be able to operate without you? And it can't. A lot of these parents, their insurance doesn't cover music therapy. And so a lot of them are dealing with kids and that have lifelong care needs. Funding is limited. And while they might have, resources for other, types of therapy, music therapy just isn't covered.
Right, it might seem more like a nice thing to be able to do, but if you're struggling with a child with a disability, you have physical therapy needs or other needs that might come before that.
And it's really, I sit down and talk with some of the parents and the caretakers of some of the clients that come in. And while they come in for the therapy session, it's really what they do at home that allows for the parent to engage with their child in a way that they've never really been able to. They find that there's a spark, a light behind their eyes when they do a singing lesson or they play the piano. They find this point of engagement with a child that they've largely been struggled to connect with. As a parent, when I talk about that moment when I turn to my son's ears, right? That moment of trying to connect emotionally, verbally, mentally, spiritually with your child is an elusive thing. And more parents that I talk to from my music therapy program express that being one of the biggest benefits that they get. That there's a sense of connection with their child that they didn't have before. And you can't place a value on that, and you can't even begin to comprehend how hard it is as a parent to have that be a challenge until you've kind of been dealt that set of cards.
One of the things I think, one of the many things I think is admirable about what you're doing is that you work with the sound levels in your room. Sometimes you go to a show and it's so loud that, it maybe you're enjoying it in the moment, but you might be doing some damage to your own hearing. How do you approach that with artists and your sound folks?
It's a challenge, right? I remember when I was doing research before I started this to kind of talk to audiologists and to see what their kind of thoughts were on the idea that I had in my mind. And many of them seemed to express the fact that it was largely hopeless, right? You just can't make it safe for the ears. But it doesn't mean that people are going to not live the lives they want to live. I remember when I first went to an audiologist and I was much younger, and I've always failed every hearing test I ever took. My doctor used to tell my mom and me that, you're just listening to headphones too loud, which was probably the case. But it was the quality of life. That was my life. That's what I wanted to do. As a doctor, to tell me, well, you just can't do that. Well, it's not a black and white thing, right? How do you help someone live the lifestyle they want to live and protect themselves at the same time? So part of our goals and part of our philosophy is to provide a sound-friendly environment for everybody. For all the kids that come to our events, we have really nice baby band headphones that we give away for free. Come with a nice case, multiple colors. They can pick something out as a baby and have them carry with them. And you give away free earplugs for other people that they're not like high fidelity, earplugs you might spend a little money on, but you have those at the table. But also it comes from the stage, right? We set decibel limits for our main PA, so as you're going to come in, your average should be around 95 decibels. One of the things people don't seem to understand, though, is that sometimes the sound man and the sound engineer have no control over the room, because if the guitarist is on the stage and he's been playing guitar for 30, 40 years, more likely than not, that individual is suffering from profound hearing loss. And what sounds like 95 decibels to them on the stage coming from their little Fender amp behind them is really more like 105 decibels out in the audience. That individual struggles to comprehend just how painful it is out there. And it doesn't matter what the sound engineer does on the mains. If the guy on the stage and playing guitar is just turning his amp up.
Just keeps turning the knob up to 11, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
That's where we see a lot of the problems. That's where we see a lot of the sound engineer loses control of the room, they say. Now, what we try to do is we work with the artists ahead of time. We tell them why they're there. We tell them about our organization. And we express to them that we'll have different cues for how can we communicate. It's not about turning it down because we're being mean or we want to say it's too loud, right? It's about recognizing why we're turning it down. Not because of being mean, but because we want it to be a safe space in all forms. Some of the programs that we launched this year to help reduce that issue is we provide in-ear monitor grants for artists, in which we'll provide a matching fund for an artist to provide or purchase in-ear monitors. If you adopt in-ear monitor use, the statistics say you're more likely to lower your risk of hearing loss. The sound in the room won't be as intense because you don't have monitors going out in front. You still got issues with some of your amps and stuff in the back, but largely the in-ear monitors they cancel all that out and everything going into that, so you really get a better control of the stage. The artist protects their ears a little longer, and they get money to purchase high quality in-ear monitors that they're more likely to use as they go forward.
Yeah, I as a father of a musician, we have preached in-ear monitors and all of that for a long time to try to preserve our own children's hearing for as long as we can. And believe it or not, we have blown through our time that we have, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you said everything you needed to say. And Tyler, I just want to thank you for coming in to share the 5 Point story. If you'd like information on upcoming shows or the opportunity to volunteer or participate in some of their programs, I encourage you to visit their website at 5pointsmusic.com. That's the number 5, 5pointsmusic.com, to learn more. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon. Thanks for watching.